The Cincinnati Bengals are on a bye week, and the offense has been frustrating. Let's talk to Brian Callahan to get his perspective on that frustration and how they can start fixing things.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm Jake Lisco. He's James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, covering your Cincinnati Bengals every day, even here on the bye week. And those special guests we tease are going to start with Brian Callahan. We're going to talk to him about what some of the frustrations are, how it's a wide variety of issues that have gone wrong, but what it means. For example, when he says they need to coach better and they need to figure things out, he's going to get into a little bit of how they're going to start correcting things. Plenty of good stuff. Always great insight when we talk to Brian Callahan. So let's jump into it. Part 1 of 2 with Bengals offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan.
We're now joined by Bengals offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan. And Brian, we have to start with Sunday. And obviously that was a frustrating day. You guys end up getting the win, but the quote that stood out to me when you discussed how you were feeling was on Monday. You talked to the writers, and you mentioned being fuming on your couch watching the film. I'm not trying to make you mad right now, but what was going through your head as you were watching that, and obviously the offense struggled so much in the second half?
The things that make me the most angry are attention to detail things that aren't up to the standard of what we expect, that anybody expects, players, coaches. I don't think there's anybody that would ever argue any of those points on our offense if you asked them about it. But those are the things that make us as coaches the most irritated, when we're capable of playing at a level that we're not playing at. But some of the things that stand in our way are things that we need to coach better, that we need to execute better in games. And again, they're not major things. They're minor details that over the course of a game, when you have 15 or 16 plays that you got to make a correction on out of 55, that makes it hard to feel like you played well. And I think that's where I ultimately landed the other day. It wasn't always about just pure offensive, plays or a missed throw. Like, those things happen. You give up pressure, you give up sacks, you miss a throw. That's football. That's the NFL. But it's the things that we can control. Our attention to the detail of executing some of those tasks, I think, has to be a lot better, and it has to be coached a lot better. And so that's what puts me in those types of moods, is that type of film watching experience. And it's not a lot of fun, and I think we're gonna be a lot better for it, though.
Offense around the league this year is at its lowest point in over a decade in many categories. There are maybe 1 or 2 teams that seem to be bucking the trend. You talk about details, you talk about coaching needs to be better. What was a quote that I've heard. I think you said that was part of it. And you being part of that coaching staff, when you say that, from your perspective, what does it mean when you say coaching needs to be better?
I think there's an old saying in coaching, is that you either coaching it or allowing it to happen. And so when things like that don't go right, that ultimately falls on me. I'm in charge of the offense. It falls on the position coaches. They're in charge of their position, of making sure that when we're out there at practice and things aren't the way that we feel like they should be, that we have to continue to hammer those little things and make sure we're doing them right. And if you see it on tape, that's ultimately what you're coaching, and that's a place that none of us expect to be. And you're always going to have errors. You're never going to play perfect. There's always going to be things to correct, and there's always going to be things you have to coach. So it's not like you're going to walk out there one day and all of a sudden everything's going to go, wow, we nailed every aspect of the game plan against every player, against every, it doesn't happen that way. But when you have more of those than you should, that's where, to me, it comes down to our job as coaches is to make sure that we're emphasizing and correcting and teaching the right things, the right times, and that guys are taking whatever that coaching is and executing it. And if you're not executing it on tape, that means you're probably not coaching it well enough. And that's our responsibility to do that better. And there's also a component of coaching better is we can find, we're having some struggles. And so our job is to find ways to put guys in better position to make more plays than we've made. However that looks, whether that's in the run game, in the protection game, in the pass game, in the play action part of it. So I try to shoulder as much of that blame as I can possibly shoulder, because that's my responsibility, and it's my job to do that, and to help guys play better and execute better. And so I never at any point would ever just say, oh, we just have to play better, period. That's not how it works. There's a lot of things that I can do better to help our offense and put them in better position to execute the things that we're capable of doing.
Are you normally the guy that's fuming if the offense struggles a bit? Because Zach obviously tries to, at least in front of us, stay as even keeled as possible. And from my perspective, so do you. Yeah. And so I do think it's interesting, like the idea of angry Brian. What's that like?
I have it in my personality. It's not something I don't enjoy that part of it. I'm much better off. I think I'm a much better coach when it's consistent and your demeanor is consistent and what you say and how you say it is consistent. I think those things matter because we ask the same of the players to be the same, be consistent, be the same guy when you walk in the building. And I try to do that myself, but there is a time and a place when things reach a point where you feel like that message needs to be delivered a different way. And I'm more than capable of delivering it in a different manner. But I do think that most coaching is most effective when you're teaching, when it's a moment where you're teaching and it's not just, the fire and brimstone and yelling and screaming and all that stuff. I think that gets tuned out pretty quickly most of the time. So I think it's effective in certain moments. And I think that I try to be as consistent as I can, but yeah, I'm certainly capable of delivering a firmer message when I feel like it might be a time and a place for that.
Going back to those details, I assume that consistent level approach is probably received better a lot of the time when it's just, we've missed something on this play. We need to make a correction. If I yell about it, what's the best way to learn? It's probably not when your sympathetic nervous system's going crazy and your fight or flight response kicks in. But is that something where, you're reviewing practice tape or reviewing your practices and you're seeing that carrying over into games, or is it something where it's been kind of hard to trace back to the practice?
It's been hard to trace back to practice sometimes. There's those things in practice don't sometimes show up the way they do in a game just because the tempo and the speed is different. And so it's a little more of a forgiving atmosphere, I think, when you're looking at technique and when things get sped up and you're playing against good players and it's not practice squad guys across from you, it changes. And so the expectation is to be able to carry that over into a game and look the same as it does in practice as best as it can. And again, the live game action is always dramatically different than what you can simulate in practice too. So I don't feel like it's a problem that we've had to carry over detail wise. It's just that in the moment, some of the stuff just isn't up to what we expect. And I felt like the other day was a good day to just make sure that we're all accountable to the same things. If you let things slide and you don't make the corrections, then that's not being accountable to one, being a good coach, and two, for players knowing that they're all held to the same standard as well. And so I think those are important moments sometimes, and they do occur usually at some point every year. You have moments like that, and it's not a abnormal meeting to have where you do that. But there's definitely an accountability factor that steps up at times when you're not playing as well as you think that we should be.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire in season-long leagues with hopes of winning a fantasy championship. We're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us this week on eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And Christian Watson is back fully healthy for the Packers and set to keep making a huge second-year wide receiver impact for Jordan Love as a big play and red zone threat. Watson, before the Week 6 bye, saw 7 targets against the Raiders, catching 3 for 91 yards. He should be more locked into producing with a good chance to score in a fine matchup against the Broncos this week. Back on the road in an AFC West matchup. Green Bay can exploit a struggling secondary with Watson's combination of size and speed. He also gets a terrific spot at home in Week 8 against the Vikings. Christian Watson is the pick this week. And Vinny I from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship. eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. The same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. From brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. And so whether it's headlight bulbs, which I've used eBay Motors for, or something as simple as windshield wipers, they have you covered. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. After the game on Sunday, Joe talked for, roughly 4 minutes at the podium, and it wasn't normal happy Joe after a win because of the circumstances. And he probably said 3 or 4 times, we have to be better. Mm-hmm. And then I go into the locker room, and I'm not going to say who because I just don't want to air him out, and it's the locker room. But one of the starters comes up and shakes his hand, and Burrow's like dialed in, sits there, and he's like, looks up, he says, we have to be better. And he's saying the same thing, just clearly in the zone and frustrated, focused, all of those things. How was he on Monday? Because I'm sure he was replaying the game in his head on Sunday, realizing that there was a lot of plays that were left on the field.
Yeah, the same. He was the same. I think he felt very similar to how I felt. And we both have, pretty prominent roles in all of the things that happen on offense. And so for us to feel that way, I think was the right way to feel. I think you'd be more concerned if we came out of that game just thinking, man, what a great win. How exciting is that?
Sure.
So our job is, my job as the coordinator and his job as the starting quarterback is to be critical of the performance. And you look at it and it just from top to bottom wasn't ultimately a great performance offensively. It was good enough to win. We went 2 for 2 in the red zone. In the first half, we played really a pretty solid brand of football for 2 of those drives there. And that was enough in that game because of how well our defense played. But it's certainly not going to be over the course of the season going to be enough. And so my job is to point out where it's not good enough. And Joe's job is to also convey that this isn't good enough. And if he was happy, I think we'd all be concerned too, because, I think we're just capable of being so much better than we've been. And I got a ton of confidence that we will be. That's the fun part about it is I think there's the ceiling is still very high for us and we have yet to put it together. And again, for a lot of reasons that nobody really is going to care about, but we're at a point now where we get to stop. We're really 0-0 with what, 11 games to play.
11. Yep.
So that's a good place to be for considering how we've had to fight and scratch and claw to get to this point. And so I am optimistic as we get healthier and we get a chance to reflect on where we're at and why we're where we are and not where we expected. I feel great about our ability to hit our stride and start playing a better brand of offensive football for sure.
When you have an offense that is built around a quarterback playing really well, skill players playing really well, you have a diverse drop back game because you have a quarterback who can handle it, as compared with some of the other teams, some of the Shanahan offenses that we've talked about in the past, where it doesn't necessarily put as much on the quarterback's plate. And then you don't get that level of play across the board from the skill guys, from the quarterback. What's your approach from a coaching perspective in that spot? Do you try to put more in that's going to try to simplify things a little bit when you have details that are going off a little bit, or trying to simplify things for a quarterback when he's pressing a little bit? Or is it, we know we're good at these things, let's figure out how to get good at these things again, or somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between is probably the best answer, because there is things that are core to who we are, and we feel really good about being able to execute those particular things. There's also an element of don't be stubborn. There's ways that we can help our guys get in better position. We can help Joe find a little bit easier path sometimes than having him have to shoulder it all. And I think that's my job and our job as an offensive staff, to put ourselves in that position where we can do a little bit more to help, still lean on the things that we know we're really good at and capable of executing at a high level. You still got to put work into those to get those where you want them to be. And then find some new things to work on, and new things that maybe aren't something that we've done a lot of in the past, but maybe we need them at this point. And so that's what these next few days are about for us during the bye week. And then when we get back and get ready to go against San Francisco is, what things can we add that makes life a little easier on everybody. That's receivers, that's the running backs, that's the quarterback, that's the line. How do we make things a little bit more friendly for them schematically?
How important is it over the next 11 games, starting with San Francisco, Brian, to have other guys emerge? Obviously, Tyler's made plays, Trenton's made plays, T's made plays too. But outside of Jamar, you look at the 3 wins, Jamar goes off in all 3 games, is a big reason why you win. Just finding someone besides him, and I know there are names, but making sure that those guys are able to play at the level that we've seen them play at. Yeah,
I think we can play. I think you're going to see. This is not characteristics of who T. Higgins is as a player. I think T's going to come back on and come alive here in the second half of the season. I have a ton of faith in him because he's done it before. I think this has been an awkward spot for him to be in, plus dealing with an injury. All the faith in the world that T is going to be the player that he's shown to be for the last 2 years. That certainly helps when he returns back to his form. We got to get some more. We got to get some more out of our younger players too. We got Chase Brown's got to find a way to make some impact. I think Andre Yoshivash has done a nice job of carving a little bit of a role and gaining trust and quarterback gaining confidence in him. I think when Charlie Jones comes back from the IR stint, we were getting pretty excited about him, especially as a punt returner. Takes one for a touchdown, and there's a lot of positivity building with Charlie in the pass game too. So those guys can have a role potentially moving forward. We got to get some production from Irv and I think Drew Samples really put in a nice place for us. He's got a nice role that he does really well. Mitch has done a nice job. We can get more from Mitch, and then there's obviously Tanner Hudson's played good for us in some small sample sizes too. So find a way to get the best of that combination of players that can help us keep moving the ball forward, and guys that I have a lot of confidence in that can really help us.
Talk a lot about skill players. How much of that is just Joe Burrow not playing like the Joe Burrow that we're used to? He's, you said that sometimes you're going to miss some throws. Sometimes, Burrow's a guy that seems to really need the reps to feel comfortable.
Yep.
And like every quarterback, there's a trust element, both with offensive line, with receivers. Is that as big a piece of the puzzle as anything?
I certainly think to start the year, that's part of it. When you missed almost 20 some days of practice, and then he wasn't healthy to begin with to start, and then he re-injures it. I think you do see a little bit of it's not rust, maybe is the best way to explain it, but you just see not the same level of execution from him early in the year. And I think that the practices have helped, the games have helped. I think he's played better as the year has gone on. And then again, that's why the second half of last week was so frustrating, because I thought we were starting to take that upward trajectory from a really, really positive game in Arizona, a good 2 first drives, thought it was really starting to take off. And then obviously we have some issues in the second half, but I think that Joe come along, the more he's playing, he'll get better and better. But it is a little bit frustrating when you get to points and we miss a couple of throws that, he normally doesn't miss. And that makes life a little bit trickier when you're trying to keep the ball in his hands and throw the ball as much as we throw it.
This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by BetterHelp, who knows that when it feels like your brain is getting in its own way, maybe that's what's going on with the Bengals offense a little bit. Like, you know what you should do. Like, you know what you've done in the past that's worked for you, what's good for you, and you just can't bring yourself to do it. Therapy and tools that BetterHelp provides can help you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. It's entirely online. It's made to cater to your schedule and use modalities for therapy that are going to be convenient for you. So if you're thinking of trying therapy, you can give BetterHelp a try. You can fill out a brief questionnaire to get started. They'll match you with a licensed therapist that fits what you're looking for. And if it doesn't work, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're going to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Today's show also brought to you by Pierce Dental Group. Pierce Dental Group has 2 locations, one in downtown Cincinnati, one in northern Kentucky, and they are the premier dental group in the area, providing world-class experience and creating confident smiles. Go where the pros go. Some of your favorite athletes in the area have gone to Pierce Dental Group, and whether it's Invisalign, cosmetics, dental implants, or just regular routine care, Pierce Dental Group has you covered. They established their downtown location in 1942. They have over 1,300 5-star Google reviews, and they also offer flexible payment options and pride themselves on maximizing your dental insurance. So don't delay. You want someone you can trust. You can trust Pierce. Visit them online at piercedentalgroup.com. That's PEARCE dentalgroup.com, or search Pierce Dental Group on Instagram or Facebook. Brian, one thing I've said, I said it after Cleveland when Joe was working through some things, and obviously that defense is amazing, and so we got that takeaway right because they've continued that. But when Joe isn't performing like the Joe we saw go 17 of 19, say on Sunday to start the game, and just playing at a really high level, about the offense being able to overcome it. And I know it's really, really hard, and I just simplified it into something that's hard to do when you have an elite quarterback.
Yeah.
But is that fair? And if so, how do you go about that as an offense? Because obviously you lean on him a ton. But let's say he's not his normal self. I don't even mean health-wise, just having an off day. How can you overcome it?
Well, I'd like to get more than what we've got from the run game in totality. I think that you'd like to be able to take a little heat off him in that regard. I think we've been okay running the football. We've been in some pretty manageable down and distances. I think we can do a lot better job on third down. That's really where our issues have come. Our base down stuff has been pretty solid. We've kept it relatively controlled, especially because we had to play a different brand of football for a few weeks there that we're just starting, I think, to come out of. I think that's the where we're at health-wise with Joe. He starts to look more and more normal. Mm-hmm. But the third down stuff has been really the broken spoke in our wheel as far as keeping drives alive, and not being able to convert at the rate that we converted last year has been a struggle. And there's a lot of different reasons for it, but we've gotten ourselves into manageable third downs and haven't been great or as good as we've been in the past converting them. And if we can find a way to keep doing that, it's gonna help the whole process along. Converting that 3rd and 1 would have been a nice conversion help. Where you get to run the ball for a yard and keep the drive going and a chance to go put more points on the board. But I think we can. There's the run game has to help us. We have to get a little more out of it. I think at the end of the day, if you're having an off day as a quarterback, you got to lean into that stuff and hope that they can pull you out of it.
Will that be do you think that could be a key play, that 3rd and 1, if you guys do figure it out?
I thought that was there's always whenever I debrief a game at the end, you go through the game and you go, what were critical mistakes that either, even when you win, there's still critical mistakes that could have lost you the game for, however the game plays out. But That 3rd and 1 in that moment, I think it was 3rd and 1 at the top of the 4th quarter. It was a 1-point game. And had we lost that game, we'd probably point to that moment and said, a failed 3rd and 1 after getting ourselves in decent position to be able to continue to drive, take more time off the clock, and again, hopefully try to get some points in that drive, is a moment in the game where it can go that it turned from our favor, and it's unfortunate that, fortunately we won, but it's unfortunate that we failed in that spot. And so that to me was a pretty critical mistake in the game at a top of the 4th quarter at a pretty tough time.
Something I actually looked at last night was your success rate on third or on any short down and distance. So not just 3rd downs, but 2nd or 3rd downs with 3 or less yards to go.
Yep.
According to what I was able to find, this doesn't include a couple of goal to go situations, but 70%, 71% roughly conversion in those spots, which is tied for 4th in the NFL behind San Francisco, Washington, Buffalo, tied with Philly. One of the few teams in the NFL throwing the ball more than running the ball in those situations. But is it staying ahead of the chains, I guess, is the theme of this topic for me in my head. When you guys are staying on schedule, it seems like things were going really well. Last year, it seemed like you had some good answers when you got behind schedule on 2nd down, 3rd down. Is that kind of what you're referencing when you're talking about some of the 3rd down stuff?
Yeah, I think that's always a critical component, especially again when you're those longer yardage. When you're in 3rd and 7, 8, 9, 10, those require everything to work. You have to separate. You have to protect for a longer period of time. You have to pick up a lot more pressures in those spots. And so it's always critical for us, especially against these defensive lines we faced in the early stretch of the year, as being as manageable as we can be. And the idea is if we're in 2nd and 5 or less, we're going to put ourselves in a pretty good chance to get into a manageable 3rd down. And then the other thing is you don't have to be in 3rd down. And our best drives this year have been, 1st down, 2nd and 2, 1st down, 1st down, 2nd and 4, 1st down. That's when you feel the rhythm. That's when you feel like your playbook sort of open to you, and you're not condensed by down and distance to do something. And when you're not playing at the level that we're accustomed to playing, that's how you try to manage some of it. So now you're not asking Joe to be there on 3rd and 9 and make an unbelievable throw with pressure in his face in a really tight window. Now the ball can come out quickly. We can manage it. We can put guys in spots, and it's been in spots successful. We have not done it consistently enough, obviously, to continue to keep drives alive and score enough points. So that's probably the best way to answer it.
Sorry to jump in. We're going to break the interview up into 2 episodes. That was part 1 with Brian Callahan. A lot of good stuff there for you to think about as the Bengals are thinking about their own offense over this bye week, going through their self-scouting, trying to figure out the right buttons to push. We're going to talk about some of that and some philosophical questions about play calling, about innovation, about getting things pointed in the right direction. Maybe health is a part of that in part 2 coming up tomorrow here on Locked On Bengals. So until then, we appreciate you listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.